What is going on, you guys? In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through my Airlift trunk setup for my 2020 Subaru WRX STI Series.White. I'm basically going to be doing a wheel well trunk setup. I want it to be show car quality, and so basically it's going to be a stealth setup, but there's going to be a viewing pane that I'm going to create using acrylic plexiglass. So I'm going to walk you guys through that. I'm going to walk you through the upholstery. Let's go on ahead and just take a look at the mock-up, and I'll show you kind of what the concept is before we start the install. All right, guys, so just like you've seen many times before, I'm not going to go through the whole way that I created the template, but this is the carpet out of my rear trunk. And all I did was take that and I laid it on top a piece of 1/2-inch plywood and traced it out first with a jigsaw, right? So I traced the whole thing out and cut the outline with a jigsaw. And then basically what I did is I want to be able to take this in and out of my trunk, just like the factory one. I want it to be completely functional. So I cut off the wings, right? So these are the wings. And then this piece up here has to fold as well. That way it'll actually be able to come out of the trunk. So I cut that as well. And the way that I made those cuts, all I did was with the carpet basically on the plywood, I just marked where it creases, right? So I marked the top crease, I marked the bottom crease on the plywood, right? So I marked it here, I marked it here, and then I drew a line straight across, and then I used a saw to cut that. So that's how I created the template. This will become my new false floor in my trunk, and you can see the piece of plexiglass that's sitting on top of it. I got this right from Home Depot. It's about 25 bucks. This is a 20-inch by 32-inch piece of plexiglass. It's about, well, it says 0.093 inches thick. It's about, I don't know, maybe a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch thick. So it's got a little bit of flex to it. But once I cut the viewing area out of the centerpiece here, I'm going to attach that plexiglass to the bottom using these aluminum rods, which I also purchased from Home Depot. They're just called flat bar, 1/8 inch thick, 1/2 inch by 36 inches long. So that is the general concept of the false floor in the viewing area. Now, the rest is what you're actually going to see when you look through the viewing area. And I did not want this to be a tangle of hoses and wires. So I created basically a platform. I'm going to attach this platform to the spare wheel well. And you can see it has the hole drilled into it. So that hole is going to align with the basically just a bolt that's going to go right down into the already pre-threaded hole in the spare wheel well where you would otherwise affix your actual spare tire, right? There's a bolt that screws in to hold it into place. And so that's going to attach there. I have a 2.5 gallon tank, Airlift tank, right? Got that from Bag Riders. 2 Viair, I think they're 440s. Which were originally chrome, but I painted them black. I got those secondhand, so cross my fingers they end up working and I don't have any issues. And then I have my Airlift manifold here, and you can see that it's actually upside down, but that's just the plate that's upside down. I'm going to actually mount it this way. So when you look into the trunk, this is basically what you're going to see. I'm actually going to create a little bit of a platform for this, so it's raised up a little bit, and then I can put a custom plate on it, right? These unscrew, and you can flip that around if you want. But then all of my wires, like my wiring harness and all of the lines, are going to actually snake out behind and go underneath the platform, and then they can come up and around and go into the back of the tank, and also down into the spare wheel well where there are already grommets to run the lines to your 4 corners. So let me go on ahead and just show you my trunk and give you an idea. I'm going to go on ahead and just kind of mock this up inside so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, check it out. So first things first, this bolt here, in case if you want to buy a new bolt, these are the thread dimensions that you need. I have an M8 1.25 by 40 millimeter. The 40 millimeter is the length, and that length is going to vary depending on your setup. But this is actually too small. I need to get a longer bolt, and I'm going to have to order it because this was the only dimension I could find at Home Depot. But I was really just trying to find out what the thread width and pitch is. So it's an M8 1.25. That's what you need to remember. And so you can see that we have these grommets here that we can tap into when we want to actually run our lines. And let me go on ahead and drop that in so you can see what it's going to look like when it's installed. One other thing I wanted to mention is if you look in here, and it's going to be kind of hard to capture on camera, but this is not perfectly flat. And so I had to actually build up some foot supports on the bottom of that wooden platform. Excuse me, that was just a game of trial and error. You can see where I marked some of the lines and used those lines to take measurements so that I could create that wooden template, that mounting plate. But let me go on ahead and put it in and show you what it's going to look like. All right, so for illustrative purposes, you can kind of see how everything fits in there. You can see the ports on the back of the tank, and there is a little bit of a gap there for those lines to run underneath. If you look at the air compressors, they do clear. So they do clear the bottom of the viewing pane. I'm going to play around with these. I might rotate them down where you basically just adjust the way the feet plate are mounted on the compressor. All right, you can see that those are completely adjustable. And, you know, I might just mount them on their side like that. If you look at the Vier manuals, that's totally acceptable way to mount them. And it just gives you a little bit more clearance. So all you will see when you look in here is the stainless steel leader lines going into the tank. So that is going to be the gist of the trunk setup, but it's going to be a plexiglass viewing pane looking in here, and all of this is going to be upholstered. Now, it also would not be an Airlift setup video if we didn't actually talk about the hardware. So let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. This is very nice hardware, and if you have purchased from Airlift or Bag Riders before, you know, you are familiar with the quality here. But this is really nice machined anodized metal. These are the fronts, right? You can see the double pillow bags, and these are the leader lines that come with the fronts. And if you look at the bottom here, you can see basically where those leader lines would otherwise screw in. This is your damper adjustment screw, which goes right into the top here. And this is the wrench that's included for adjusting the perch. So we're not actually going to be installing these today, but all we're going to be doing is just focusing on getting this floor piece finished up, creating the viewing pane, and getting that piece upholstered. And then we'll move into a following video where we actually get it installed in the car, and you can see what that's going to look like. But there have been plenty of videos about how we actually go about installing these in a WRX or an STI. So I don't think I'm going to go through that process. It's just not really necessary. There's plenty of other content out there for it. But just wanted to show you guys the idea behind the trunk setup. And, you know, kind of document that part of the journey, because again, I haven't seen that before in a WRX or an STI, and just want to show you that it's possible and how it's possible and some of the different considerations that you want to keep in mind if that's something that you're thinking about doing. So let's go on ahead and get going on this fabrication. So we know that we need to cut the viewing pane out of the wood floor here, but we don't know exactly where we need to make our cuts. And the way that we're going to determine that is by using the plexiglass sheet, which I've gone on ahead and I've placed in the trunk. And we're basically going to look in here and see, all right, what is our viewing area going to look like if we were to use the whole plexiglass sheet, and how far in do we want the plexiglass sheet to be kind of like inset mounted on the floorboard. So I'll show you what I mean. Basically, we look in here and the sheet looks hazy because it has protective plastic sheets covering it. It's actually perfectly clear once you peel those sheets off, but you can see that the edge of the sheet is here. So it basically goes from right here all the way to right here, and that's more or less centered in the trunk. And then if I pull it back a little bit, you know, basically when I look into the trunk and when judges look into the trunk at the shows, I want them to basically see like the front part of the tank here. I don't want them to see the edge of the wheel well, just in case that fabrication, you know, when I make the upholstery cover for that, you know, if it doesn't come out great going around the corners, I don't want that to be obviously visible. So I want it to basically be the inside here, and then I want to be able to see the manifold up there as well. So this is basically our viewing pane. It's about Let's use our tape measure. From the edge of the plexiglass, let's say it's about 3 inches in, all the way over, maybe 3.5 actually. So we did 3.5 inches in from the outside of the plexiglass there, and then 3.5 inches in over here. That would get us to about the edge of the wheel well at the most extreme point of the viewing area. And then up at the top, we want to basically be able to see the airlift manifold very clearly. And you'll be looking at that at an angle just like we are right now, looking into the trunk. So let's say up at the top, we make it 4 inches in, right from the top. And then from the bottom, we do 3 inches. So we could even do 4 if we wanted, but we'll do 3. So we're going to do 3 inches of viewing area on the bottom, 4 inches that we're going to trim off the top, and then 3.5 from each side. So we're going to go on ahead and start. I've basically centered this on the part of the floor where I want it centered. And we're going to go on ahead and just create an outline. And then we'll use that outline to measure in from where we took our measurements in the trunk. All right, so you can barely see it. It's kind of faint. All this is going to be covered in upholstery, but we're going to go 3.5 inches here, 3.5 inches that way. We're going to go 3.5 that way. We're going to go 3.5 that way. And then we're going to go 4 that way. Now that we have our sketches, we'll take the actual measurements. 3.5. All right, so we've got our areas marked. I'm going to go on ahead and we'll actually just use the plexiglass. I was going to get it straight edge, but they cut this stuff pretty straight right from Home Depot. So we're going to go on ahead and create our cut lines. These are going to be our inset cut lines. And I'm actually going to radius these corners because it's going to be a lot easier to upholster the inside corners if I radius them. If I keep them hard 90s, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get a clean pool with the fabric that I'm going to use for upholstering them. So I'm going to create radius lines for the inside corners, and then we'll get out the saw and start making our cuts. To create our radius, all I'm doing is taking a paint can, right? This is just spray paint. And with that paint can, basically touching or abutting the perimeter lines that we just created, I'm going to go on ahead and just trace the bottom of that paint can. And we can see that there is a little bit of bleed because of just the pencil. So I just need to adjust that a little bit. And there we go. We have a nice inside radius. Instead of making a hard 90, it's going to be, well, it's going to be easier to cut, but it's going to be a lot easier to upholster as well. All right, so now when we get these cuts made and we affix that plexiglass to the underside of our false floor, all you're going to see is a nicely radiused viewing pane. When you look into the trunk, it's going to look great. So you're going to need some sawhorses. You have to keep your materials secure. So some clamps are helpful. These are just general purpose clamps. And these ones actually came with the sawhorses in a deal from Home Depot. So like I said, I'll drop a link for those in the comments. To make our cut, we're going to use a jigsaw. And our jigsaw is going to have a finishing blade on it from Diablo. That blade is basically designed to make a slower but much cleaner cut. You want to make sure you use a finishing blade because otherwise, you're going to get a lot of fraying and rough cuts in your plywood. So we're going to use the jigsaw to make our cut, but you can't just, you can't just go in and cut. And because this is an inside piece, we're not going from an edge and working in. It's an inside piece. We have to start somewhere. And so we're just going to use a drill with a large bit on it to drill a pilot hole. And then from that pilot hole, we can drop our jigsaw in and go to work making our inside radius cuts. Don't forget your PPE, personal protective equipment. We've got our goggles on to protect our eyes from shavings. Some people might also recommend some ear cans. I don't think that this job is quite loud enough for the cans, but if you have sensitive ears, might not be a bad idea. So never forget your PPE. All right, so we got the viewing pane created. And now when you look into the trunk, you're going to see the plexiglass mounted underneath. This will all be wrapped in fabric, right? We're going to upholster it. However, I am going to route this edge. And this is completely optional, but it's just going to give it a nice, clean, rounded corner. All right, so we have routed the inside top piece of our wood. And if we take a closer look at it, you'll see that we now have a nice beveled edge at the top. And that's just going to make it so that when I lay the upholstery on this, it's going to just create a nice rounded corner effect up on the top here in our viewing area. So just those little finishing touches that are going to really make this setup stand out from the rest once we get it all assembled and put into the car. All right, so now that we're done making all of our cuts, we can go on ahead and start the upholstery process. Now, I actually have never upholstered before, and so I'm not going to start with the largest, most complicated piece, right? That's the center of the trunk floor. And there are outside beveled corners, there are inside corners. There's just a lot of areas to mess up there. And I think it's going to be a lot easier on me if I just start off with something simpler, like these little winglets that are going to attach to the side of that. Right? Much more simple piece to upholster, I'd imagine. A couple things that you are absolutely going to need in order to do the upholstery. You're going to, of course, need your actual fabric. I got this off of Etsy. It's a big old roll of quilted vinyl, black quilted vinyl with red stitching. It's going to look great inside the STI where it has a black and red color scheme already. From the factory, of course, you're going to need a good set of shears, right? So these are all-purpose, heavy-duty shears from Home Depot, but you can get fabric shears, dedicated for cutting fabric that work just as well. You're going to need a staple gun. I got this from Joann Fabric. I will put a link to this in the description, as well as, of course, some staples. And then, whoopsies, you're also going to want some spray adhesive. I went to Joann Fabric and they had spray adhesive that was like 20 bucks for a can. I actually bought it and I was intending on using it, but then I read that you have to iron it on, and I don't really want to put any kind of heat on the quilted vinyl, even though they say you can put parchment paper between the iron and the fabric to protect the fabric. I just don't want to deal with that. And so while I was at Home Depot, I got the Gorilla spray adhesive, heavy duty. It can be permanent if you use it appropriately, indoor, outdoor. It says appropriate for fabric. So I'll put a link to this in the description as well. But I've had great luck with the Gorilla adhesives in the past. And I've never used their spray adhesive, but I have no reason to think that it's not going to work just as well as well. So we're going to go on ahead and start by cutting off a piece of fabric to use for our winglets. And then we will get going getting those upholstered. All right, y'all, it is a new day. Same set of sweatpants. Don't judge me, it's the holiday break. And I actually came out here last night, did a little bit more work. I had to practice up with these pieces some more. I had some free time. I didn't record it because they're pretty simple pieces to put together. But I got the two side wings and then also the rear flap as well. And today we are going to tackle upholstering the oh so complicated centerpiece here. So what I will say is that I actually watched a video on YouTube by a channel called Sailrite. That's all one word, Sailrite, where he is upholstering a piece of wood that has several outside bends, inside bends, hard inside corners, hard outside corners. And it's just this like really weird shaped piece of wood. And I feel like that video is going to help me quite a bit when I go to upholster this piece because it's kind of similar where it's got the outside corners. Let me zoom in. We've got the outside corners, outside rounded pieces, inside rounded pieces. There's just a lot happening. And so that video I feel like is going to be really helpful. I learned quite a few tips as far as making relief cuts in the fabric. And we're going to go on ahead and see if we can tackle this today. All right, so a quick update, and then we will start the time lapse back. But you can go on ahead and see how we did on this outside corner. And I started with this one because this is actually the piece of panel that's going to be up against the rear seat area, whereas that side's going to be visible when you open the trunk. So I want that side to be the cleanest. So I'm starting over here so I can kind of work out any kinks and figure things out as I go. But to be quite honest, this is turning out really good. So this outside corner, you've got a little bit of a crease here, and that's not ideal in the world of upholstery, but honestly, nobody's going to notice that. And then these inside corners, so you can see how I made these relief cuts. They turned out beautifully. And then we go right into another outside corner here, and that one turned out really well, really nice as well. So really happy with how this is turning out so far, and it's going a lot faster than it was yesterday. So Sailrite, kudos to you, my guy. Your video has already helped me out tremendously. Looking forward to getting this thing wrapped up today and in pretty short order. All right, so before we go on ahead and start out with the window piece, we're gonna flip this bad boy over and see what it looks like. Let's go on ahead and have a look and see how much our handiwork has paid off. We obviously still have some flappies here that we're gonna go around and trim those off in the end. But let's go on ahead and flip this over for a quick sneak peek for what our trunk is going to look like. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Check it out. Check it out. All right. Yes. Now, there are a couple of little creases here. Those are just from shipping. They will work out over time, but they'll also work out a little bit easier if I massage them in with my heat gun. So I'll do that at the end before I show you guys the finished product. And obviously, there's some slack in here where the window's going to go. So we're going to go on ahead and flip this back over, start off on the window piece, but let's go on ahead and just take a look here and check out the handiwork, guys. It is looking pretty good. All right, moment of truth. That got a little bit sketchy in some of these corners. Some of these turned out a little bit better than the other ones, but I think all in all, for the most part, it's not going to be noticeable as long as that little guy does not get any worse. Yeah, let's go ahead and flip this over and see what it looks like and what it might look like. We can start envisioning with the viewing pane. Oh man, I am loving how this is turning out. So, all right, next steps, we're gonna go on ahead and flip this back over. We're gonna cut off all of the excess, and then we are going to start attaching the actual viewing pane, the plexiglass, to the little viewing panel here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so next up, we want to go on ahead and test fit everything in the trunk, but I'm loving how this is coming together. If you go on ahead and have a peek inside the trunk, we've got perfect fitment. Once I get the viewing pane on here, we should still have more than enough clearance. I think what I'm going to do is build up a little platform for this and then have the lines route down, and I'm going to cut a hole out here. So you won't be able to see, all you'll see is the lines going up like that. So back to the plexiglass. All right, so we have the aluminum flat bar that we trimmed down, which will help us to brace the acrylic plastic to the underside and get a nice tight seal. Right, if we just used screws, it's not going to distribute the pressure evenly, and you might have areas that bow out. So we're using the aluminum flat bar, and that's going to help create evenly distributed pressure when we screw it in. But it was a little bit too long, especially on the sides, so we had to trim those down. These are just rough cuts. They don't need to be anything pretty. Nobody's going to see this. And this is what I used. So I just have a little Dremel tool from Ryobi and a cutting wheel on it. And thankfully that didn't shatter, but aluminum is pretty soft. And so went on ahead and got the rough cuts with the aluminum flat bar. And next, what I'm going to do is use my drill. And I have to pre-drill some pilot holes here. And that'll allow me to screw, basically, I'm just going to screw straight into the wood but I need there to be a hole for the screw to pass through. Of course, in the flat bar and the acrylic, you don't want to screw into acrylic because it can shatter. So we're going to drill a hole big enough for the screw to pass through, but we're not going to drill into the wood because we want the screw to just bite into the wood. So we're going to go on ahead and do that now. All right, now a couple things. We are using number 8 5/8 inch screws. These are wood screws that I got from Home Depot. And you actually could possibly use self-tapping screws for the sheet metal, but that gets kind of messy. So we're using number 8 5/8 inch screws. We're using 5/8 inch because we have the flat bar that we have to get through. We have the acrylic that we have to get through. And then we have a 1/2 inch piece of plywood. So we just don't want these to poke out of the other side of the plywood and then put holes in our vinyl, right? So you want to make sure that you don't get screws that are too long. And then the other thing is I did a test screw or drilled out this hole on this test piece here just to make sure that was the right fit. With our number 8 screws, I'm using an 1164 drill bit. And when I screwed through, or when I drilled through the aluminum, when it broke through, it, shot through really. You have to use a good amount of pressure to get through the aluminum. And so, because I'm using a drill, right? Not like a drill press where you have really good control. And so what I'm going to do is actually drill the pilot holes in the sheet metal. I'm going to do that off of the acrylic, and then I'm going to put it on and use it as a template to drill the holes in the acrylic, because I don't want the drill bit to shoot through the flat bar and then crack the acrylic. It was like a $25 piece of acrylic, so if we can do this without ruining one, that would be great. So let's go on ahead and start by creating our pilot holes. All right, guys, quick update. We took a little break for lunch, and we've got that piece all put together. Next piece that we're going to put together is going to be the mounting plate that is going in the wheel well. So we'll take another quick look at that. Basically, the way that this is going to be mounted is we're going to have our 2 compressors kind of off at an angle like that. And then we're going to have the manifold mounted in the middle. Now, the Airlift instructions recommend that the manifold is mounted higher than the compressors and the tank. That's important for drainage. That's not physically possible, but I can get it up to almost higher. So I'm going to build a raised platform to mount the manifold to. It too is going to be upholstered. And I went on ahead and just kind of test fitted. So I took these blocks, I put them in there, and then I put the manifold on top. And then I put my false floor in, and I still have about 1 inch of clearance. So this is about 4.5 inches high. The manifold itself, we're actually going to create the mounting bracket to extend about 1/2 inch past each side. So it's going to be about 8 inches wide by 4.5 inches deep. That'll be the top plate. And then there will be a recessed 3-walled piece underneath. So it basically is like a perch. And then the back is going to be hollow, so that when I actually mount it in the car like this, we can route the air lines into the back and underneath, where I'm going to basically cut out a hole in that for the airlines to route down to the underside of the car. So let's go on ahead and jump right in. So we got the chop saw for this. It's definitely a little bit of overkill, but I'm using scrap wood, and the chop saw is just gonna work a lot better to get a nice square cut. We are also going to be building a box, and so having nice square cuts is it's a luxury that I can afford, because fortunately I have a chop saw. If you don't have a chop saw, you can definitely still make these cuts with a jig saw, with a circular saw. You just would need some clamps and to be very meticulous with your lines. But yeah, we've got the chop saw, so that's what we're going to use. All right, so we have made all of our cuts, and I've just got the box mocked up here, so you can see just high level what it's going to look like. Now you're going to see that I'm using these screws by a company called Craig, and I'm using a device that they make. It's a jig. It's called a pocket hole jig, and it's basically going to make it so I can attach this without there being any visible screw holes on the outside. Maybe a little bit of overkill because this is all going to be wrapped in upholstery anyways, but I like a nice clean finish, so we have the tools, we're going to use them. All right, so as you can see, we created our mounting platform, and that is a 3-walled box. So if you look at the back side, see if you can see in there, it's going to be a little cubby where we are able to route the wires in onto our mounting plate and underneath. What I need to do now is cut out a hole here where that is going to be mounted so that we got a place for all of our wires and for our airlines to route underneath, and then I will upholster this, and then I will mount this to that. All right, guys, day 3, we are back at it, and we are almost done, actually. We don't really have a lot left to do today. Almost the entire interior trunk setup is complete, but we need a way to attach the manifold to our little mounting box here that I created. If you look closely, you'll see that these screws, basically the bolts that they give you at the manifold kit, they are going to go, if I were to use these, they would go straight down and then they would basically hit down here. So even if I drilled this out, there's not going to be any way that I can get underneath there and tighten the nut, right? Because it's going to hit the vertical piece on the wall on each side. And so basically what I'm going to do is make a quick trip to Home Depot, and I'm going to bring these bolts with me, and I'm going to buy some lag screws. So, or lag bolts, I should say. Lag bolts are basically, they're like this, right? So if I show you this right here, it is a bolt that basically it has much thicker threads on it, and it's a wood screw. So instead of having to bolt it into place using a nut and bolt, you can just screw it into place. And I think that will work. I'll just have to be careful to get one that clears the airlift housing here so that I can easily get in there and tighten it down and loosen it up with something like a socket wrench. So to Home Depot we go. All right, y'all, so we are back from Home Depot. We got some lag screws here. These are 1/4 inches in diameter, and they are 2 inches long. And I got them 2 inches long. They're a little bit longer than the ones that I had before, because when we put them in, when we install them, that's where they're going to sit on the manifold. And I want them to go all the way through that top piece of wood so we get maximum bite with the threads. Once I have the manifold centered, I'm going to drill some pilot screws or pilot holes, because the thickness of these screws could possibly split the plywood if we don't have pilot holes. So I'm going to just go on ahead and get this centered. I'll mark it where I want the holes to be drilled, and then I'll drill the pilot holes, and then we will install the screws. All right, check it out. So we got that mounted, and because we're going to be looking into the trunk like this, I need to flip the Airlift manifold plate around so it's facing the right way. And I am going to get a custom plate eventually, but for now, I just want it to look good when we look into the trunk, and it, like I said, make sure it's facing the right way. So we've got a very small Allen wrench. It is 1/16, and we'll use that to take these tiny little screws out, these 4 screws, and that'll allow us to flip the plate around. When you look into the trunk, the wiring harness and all of the lines are going to go back behind the manifold. And then as far as the lines go, the air lines, they are going to go into that little piece that I carved out there. So they'll go into the wheel well and then split out to the 4 corners. And I am really happy with how this is turning out. Our next step is going to go on ahead and get all of these pieces mounted and figure out what orientation we want everything to be in. So we're going to go on ahead and get started with that now. As far as the air compressors go, so they've got these 4 mounting points right on each compressor. And then the tank also has 4 mounting points, and it has the drain there. So you want to make sure that we keep that in mind. We're probably going to have to drill something out for the drain. And we're going to have to get a little bit creative with how we template the marking points here, because unlike the compressor where we can just set it down and mark it, the tank is going to be a little bit more tricky. Now, when I went to Home Depot, I picked up a Milwaukee liquid paint marker. It's a white marker, so it's going to show up on this very easily, this vinyl. And I'm going to use it to mark the holes, and I'm going to see if I can get in there and mark the holes as well. It'll just be faster than using like blue painter's tape to create a template. So we're going to go on ahead and get going on that now. Guys, we are getting to the difficult decisions, and I am super torn right now because there are basically, well, there's several different ways that we can set this up. But for one, I need my mounting ports because this is a front facing mounting port, right? There's none of the side mounts with this tank. I need these facing forward. Otherwise, my stainless steel braided lines aren't going to be long enough to snake behind and plug in behind. So I need this facing forward, but then I have basically two choices with, or I guess I should say 4 choices with my compressors. Option number one is going to be having them flipped around like upright like this. This is your standard upright mounting. And option two is having them laying on their side like this. I kind of like that. It's a nice low profile design. If we flip it up, we can get an idea what it would look like, right? If I were to mount them vertically. And they have to be kitty cornered like this because I need access to the ports, right? So I like the vertical orientation. I think it looks clean, but then the port is blocked. So it has to be kitty cornered a bit so that our airline can snake in and get to the port. It actually would be this end. And so we can either do vertical kitty cornered like this, and this is a great orientation because the wiring is in the back and it can also tuck into that hole that I created, and it's just going to be a super clean install. Option two is to flip them around, and if we flip them around, the compressor, I don't know what you call this, the engine for the compressor, it's all the way in the back, so it's no longer obstructing the port. So if we do that, we can do them with a vertical orientation, and that would look really good. But then our wiring is coming out of the front, and it's not really noticeable because you can snake it under the tank, but it's also just not quite as clean. But actually, now that I look at that, like that's really not noticeable at all, and gives us a lot more flexibility with how we run our stainless steel lines. If we do it like this, we can actually take our stainless steel lines, our braided lines, and we can, all right, so you can see everything. So if we have it like this, then we can take our stainless steel lines and we can actually do like a loop-de-loo like that. And maybe it would be better if it were underneath, but like that style looks really good, right? It would be kind of like a clover leaf setup, where, you know, I'd have it replicated on the other side, and it gives it a really cool kind of just design aesthetic, which I do love a good design aesthetic, if I'm being honest. We could use this one, right, and do like a setup like that. That might make sense as well. There's just a lot more options, and I don't have to switch the feet around, right? If we did the side mount, we'd have to switch the feet around, but actually I think I'm really leaning towards doing it this way, and I'll just snake the wiring harnesses under the tank, and none of that's going to be noticeable anyways because it's the trunk of the car. So all right, I think we landed on our preferred setup. That works awesome. All right, I had to move it to the ground just because I needed to zoom out and just see what everything looked like from above. I know that some of these pieces are not perfectly centered, and so just trying to kind of adjust everything and lay it all out so that even though it's not perfectly centered, it looks as symmetrical as possible. And I think that we've got it pretty much down. This is a quick mock-up of what it's going to look like in the trunk, and the lighting is really harsh right now, but I think you guys can see that, and I think it looks amazing. Good Lord, look at that overexposure. Yeah, I am super happy with how this is turning out. We're going to go on ahead and drill some pilot holes and get everything bolted in. this is the bottom of the tank, and I wanted to go on ahead and get this elbow installed because this is going to be for my drain. And I wanted to get that installed before I bolt the actual tank down, because as you can see, there is not a lot of clearance there to work. And so if I had to try and get this installed straight, you know, with the right amount of torque and the threading, after the tank is bolted in, it would be quite difficult to do because there is literally no clearance. But now that it is installed, I will very easily, it's a push to connect 90. I'll be able to attach an air line to that with a Schrader valve that I can use to purge the water from my tank as it collects. All right, so we got the tank mounted. We actually had to run back out to Walmart because I was all out of washers. And so we had to go and buy some flat washers so that the bolts that are going through the underside here actually had something to bite into. So those nuts were not otherwise just driving into the wood. So we had to get the flat washers and put them in between the nuts and the wood. And that makes our tank nice and secure. So that's good to go. Next is going to be to install the stainless steel braided lines for the air compressors. And then I'm going to install the fitting for the return to the manifold, but that fitting will also have my water trap, and I'm going to route that line underneath. So that's going to be a 90 fitting that I install there. All right, so let's go on ahead and get going with that. All right, guys, so we are in a pretty good spot, except for the shape of my garage, which is absolute carnage, as you can see. I've got a lot of cleaning up to do, but we are just about done with our trunk setup. So we got all of our lines routed, as you can see. I went on ahead and kind of snaked these around like this. The goal with that was really just to make sure they weren't rubbing up against the compressor housing, because they're going to vibrate quite a bit, and that's going to take the paint right off of that. So I wanted them, you know, set up in such a way that they would be out of the way, not rubbing on anything, except for maybe themselves, but they're stainless steel braided lines. We've got the elbow fitting over here. That's going to be for our return to the manifold, and we will have the water trap mounted somewhere in the trunk for this, probably also in the spare tire well. It needs to be mounted vertically. This is the Airlift water trap, so it automatically purges, so it will drain down into one of the gaskets or one of the grommets, using an airline that'll just automatically drain and purge outside of the car. Now, I got a thumb screw. You can probably just barely see it because it's kind of dark. Let's see if I can get a good angle on it. See that? There it is. So that is a thumb screw. I got that off of Amazon. And that basically is going to go right into where the factory spare wheel mounts. Right, there's just a bolt that would keep the factory spare wheel mounted in the trunk. Even for the Series.White, which does not have a spare wheel from the factory, those thumb screws fit. There is a threaded hole there that will keep all of this secure. There are several mounting points on the underside. I've put felt pads that I got from Home Depot as well on each of those mounting points to help reduce noise and vibrations. So these are heavy duty felt pads. You get them right from Home Depot, and they're primarily made for furniture in your house, right? To keep it from like scratching up wood floors and things like that. But I have them just fixed to the underside here, again, just to help with vibrations and noise. And so I'm going to go on ahead and test fit this in the trunk. I'll give you one last peek, and that'll pretty much wrap up the video for the Airlift Stealth trunk setup in my 2020 Subaru WRX STI Series.White. And I don't know if there'll be a next video. If there is a next video, it will basically just be probably a final product, right? There's a lot of other videos out there that show you how to run the wiring harness, how to do the airlines, all that good stuff. Probably duplicative for me to create a video on that as well. But this is really what I wanted to show you because I hadn't seen a stealth wheel well trunk setup like this on a Subaru, on an STI, not a clean show car quality finish like this. And guys, I've never done upholstery before. I've never worked with this kind of vinyl before. Just kind of a handy dude with a bunch of random tools in his garage, and was able to make this happen. So let's go on ahead and take a look, see what the finished product's going to look like. And let me know what you guys think of this in the comments below. Thanks for stopping by. And until next time, we'll talk to you later. Have a good day.